Welcome to another edition of Working with Gen Z. Friends, we've often heard this saying that you have a limited window to make that first impression, and your first impression can often make or break you. And there's a corollary to that. If you are a leader and there's a team that follows you, you have to do much beyond that, right? People look up to you in ways in which how you walk, how you talk, what are your values, how do you gather and make influence in teams. All of that matters, and that really creates a brand. Oftentimes, we tend to undermine how important that can be, even while we can be very competent. And that's the word where we use that. Do leaders have the appropriate executive presence? But how exactly do you bring and build that executive presence? It's a mystical word, and there is a lot of talk around it. But today, we have an expert who can unpeel that for us. I'm very happy. My colleague and our guest, Sheetal, has agreed to do this episode on that. Sheetal, good evening and welcome to the show.
Good evening, and absolute pleasure and an honor to be here. Thank you so much, Nikhil.
Excellent. So I know, Sheetal, both of us have been juggling very hard to land to a date. It had to be a late evening, I'm sure, on a Friday evening, but I'm deeply grateful that you've agreed to do this late evening before the weekend. So let's get to it. Very excited. This is a topic, obviously, for all of us who worked and have been in the professional space for a few years, but we know that, but we're going to actually unpeel and get to understand as a little more granular level, but also maybe for a different cohort, the young managers who are entering the worst. So all of that can come in a moment, but first I'd like you to share a little bit about your background, your story, and what you do.
Okay, so yes, I've been doing this for over 2 decades now. I work with senior leaders and star performers in the corporate world and help them upgrade their executive presence. Now, the interesting thing, Nikhil, is that people use the word executive presence, but they can spot it, but they can't define it. So when I was researching for my book as well, I asked a lot of people, and I heard things very frequently like, "Oh, it's the it factor, it's the X factor," as if it's a television show. But when I asked people to define, they couldn't. But when I asked them to spot it, they could. So when I asked them, "Can you tell me a cricketer who has executive presence? Or can you tell me a movie star or a celebrity?" They could. So then I said, it's time to demystify and let's have a scientific model, a model-based, understanding of executive presence. So I researched extensively. I spoke to leaders, I spoke to participants, I spoke to L&D heads, I even spoke to young millennials and Gen Z to help understand what is executive presence in their context. I'm happy to share that I came up with a very simple and easy to follow formula, which I also use as a diagnostic tool called the POISE formula of executive presence. Each letter stands for one aspect. So the letter P stands for your physical presence. The O stands for your online presence. The I stands for your influencer skills. The S stands for your stage presence. And the E stands for your engagement presence. So that is the background.
Fantastic. So I'm so very happy. We're going to talk a little bit about the book later in the show, and certainly we're going to try to go deep into this very nice and powerful framework that you've been using, which sort of condenses, if we had to build a formula for executive presence. So we'll get to that. But before we get to that, Sheetal, you've done so much work. Let's, if you can, and if you can help our viewers and listeners to understand, when we say executive presence, what are we talking about? Is it more the way we look and feel? Is it more about just our ability to communicate? What comes in it, right? Because it seems like it could be everything, but yet it's better if we can define it somewhere. So how would you go and describe that?
Yeah, sure. See, let's agree that your knowledge and your content or your understanding of your business and your job is the foundation of your corporate career. That you cannot walk away from. So that is a very solid foundation. But beyond that, what more? So I always draw a parallel and I say that, with climbing the corporate ladder across the world, it's like climbing Mount Everest. Mountaineers will tell you that there it's a two-step journey. First, you walk to the base camp, then you attempt the summit. The skills needed to get to the base camp are very different from the skills needed to get to the summit. Similarly, in the corporate world, there is a certain base camp. Technical skills, intellectual skills, and hard work will get you to the corporate base camp. But once you reach there, the skill set changes drastically because now that becomes a hygiene factor and everybody has it. So, what is going to take you further? And this is where executive presence comes in. Yes, it is perception. It is how others perceive you as a leader. You could be doing a lot of great work, but if you're not visible, it is a problem. The three most frequently heard, comments whenever I'm asked to coach senior leaders is first one, he's technically brilliant, very smart, but somehow lacks gravitas. Second one, she's delivered great results. We want to promote her. But you know something? She doesn't look like a leader. And the worst one, who is he? Yeah, I think I've met him. Zero visibility. So clearly, looking like a leader, displaying gravitas, what is your internal visibility, and how are others perceiving you becomes a very critical element of executive presence.
Yeah, wow, what wonderful. Three excellent examples. Even while they're very quick, short examples, I'm sure all the listeners here, I know that we've probably been in our career where we didn't consciously know about it until, right, as you've kind of spelled it out that, okay, you're good at something, but not good at something, but how do you actually build that missing link or that missing element? Okay, so let's go to it. Shital, before we get to poise, the purpose for our episode and this show is obviously focused with Gen Z. Let's talk a little bit about them first. So in their context, we're going to talk about how do we use poise and understand that poise formula. But in their context, given that they're very digitally savvy, they can multitask, right? But they also have, I mean, if we think about just a kind of a general stereotype that, okay, there's someone who's got shorter attention span, they get disengaged quickly. So when we look at all of this as their background and their context, do you feel that is that something that goes against them? Or do we feel that there is a way for us to leverage some of that?
It's a very interesting question. Some things change and some things never change. So even for Gen Z, I would like to tell them that when it comes to executive presence, some things have changed and some will never change. So if you look at each aspect, like let's look at physical presence.
Sure.
Now, yes, you can work from home. So that is wonderful. But the fact is that when you get onto a screen and you're doing business with a client who's sitting in any part of the world, while you may not have to wear a business suit, so that has changed. But be professional in your attire and well groomed. Looks definitely conveys a very simple message that I'm interested, I'm invested, and I have respect for you and your time. So that has not changed. If you look at body language, it's always critical to have a strong body language which shows interest, which shows I am invested in what you have to say, which also shows that I'm confident. Because, people form opinions within a fraction of a second when they meet somebody. Before you've even spoken a single word, people have formed an opinion. Now that will not change, right? So it's important that you understand what are the elements of body language, how to read a room, and what are the signals that you're sending out, and what are the signals that you're seeing from others. So comprehending that becomes important. When it comes to online presence, I would say for Gen Z, it's very critical that they understand that people meet them before they meet them. The decision to hire, promote, do business with, and even marry is influenced by what people have seen each other on a screen. So clearly, online matters. Influence the skills, whether it is your ability to focus, take ownership, listen, display maturity, offer a calibrated response. Now, these things will not change. But yes, you have to build focus.
Yeah.
Stage presence has not changed. That is something which is a communication skill. Last 10,000 years, it has not changed. Yes, networking styles have changed. So engagement has changed. Today, you can network online. 10 years ago, this would have been not possible. So some things change, Some just never change.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So I think you're right. You're touching upon some of the six key points of that framework. And I'm going to just now take this opportunity. Let's kind of go deep. So when you talk about the P, the physical element, here is the generation, Sheetal, probably is very happy, as you said very rightly, that, in their life, they've seen 2 years of like a pandemic or 3 years of pandemic. And they seem to believe that, the world went on quite nicely with an online presence and them being on a camera, and that's absolutely fine. And we all had some advantages of being in that space. Now when you bring them back to work, uh, do you sense that? So what could be, you think about in some professions, like in financial services, in consulting, obviously there is a certain expectation that yes, there's a dress code and so on. But on a whole, how do we bring that mindset in them, right? What have you seen? What can the managers say? Do we just simply make that and tell them as part of a policy? But I'm asking this more in the context of how do we get them to believe that, that physical presence matters, right? Beyond just kind of being directed and told them that, look, this is your new hire, you're going to have to do this. They'll probably comply with it. But maybe the messaging that says that, how you show up with clients, how you interact with peers, it does matter. So what tips or what have you seen or what do managers do?
I always want to ask the Gen Z a question that does packaging matter?
Mhm.
Because in their generation, they're the largest consumer of luxury goods and lives and experiences, right? So,
Definitely.
does packaging matter? You walk into a showroom to buy something expensive. The item may be as big as my thumbnail, but then they'll put it in a velvet box and then they'll package it and then they put it in a bigger box and a bigger box and they'll wrap it and they'll put a bow. So the item is like the whole packaging is possibly 100 times the size of the item, right? A second example I like to give them is a restaurant. If a restaurant has to do just 5, 6 things, and people can pay anything from 3 to 5x more. One, convert white light to yellow light and dim the light. Two, put tall red wine glasses and expensive cutlery and crockery on the table. Three, create an ambiance and an experience with soft music and some flowers on the table. Four, they can even serve half the food, so cut the portion into half. But five, garnish it and present it well and share what are the ingredients that go into it. People can pay a large 5x more because that was food and this is an experience. So yes, in the world of packaging and experience, first impressions matter. We do use all our senses to form an opinion. So even in the world of business, every industry, legal, banking, financial services, consulting, IT consulting, hospitality, most industries have a uniform and an expected what we call as appropriate dressing. So I think it's important for us to understand.
Yeah. And do you, in your experience, Sheetal, are there companies or do you think of companies who do it well? For instance, I recall we used to work very closely with Deloitte as one of our tax partners. And I remember going into one of their offices quite frequently, in fact, many occasions. They actually had a mirror, believe it or not, as you enter the offices. Okay, very professional, large offices. And I think there was this saying that, okay, how do we look today? Or how are we showing up today? And it was literally meant that, okay, if somebody came like not shaving and somebody came with, the beard was not trimmed or whatever, right? I mean, it was like, I think they were told. And if you were told more than one or two times something, I think, and then again, there's some kind of an escalation. So do you, I mean, in your experience, have you seen either what managers have done or some companies who they do a good job and they've always kind of ensure that their brand remains intact, even at the line level or the youngest of the managers coming in?
Yes, I would say most companies, most industries are particular. And if you look at the senior bosses who could possibly be Gen X or baby boomers, you would see that, they are sharply dressed, they are well dressed, they are particular about how they dress. And yes, I will always tell people that it's a very every industry today is competitive. There are very few industries which are left where business is easy. Now, in a situation like this, in a very competitive industry, it's very difficult for the senior leaders and the partners to sell the business. Now, the junior people in the team, as we go down the pyramid, have to make sure that the account is serviced well, the client is happy, and they have to convey seriousness. So your appearance, your behavior, your communication, everything conveys I'm serious, I mean business. So physicality may be the tip of the iceberg, but it matters. I always tell people only 10% of the iceberg is visible above the water, 90% is below the water. But you know something? That's the only visible part. So your physical presence matters. It's the first thing that people look at you when you walk in through the door. Even before you have said hi, they have noticed your physical presence. So it is a filter.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, sure. So let's now go to the next one. I think just unpeeling your voice formula is very good here. What about the online presence? Here, one thought that obviously comes to me is that they are tech savvy. They're likely on Instagram. They're likely on LinkedIn, and they're likely on, I don't know, half a dozen other platforms. But I guess one thing that often gets told or not told maybe is that are you consistent with your online presence, right? And therefore, if you go to a platform like a LinkedIn, where it's a little more serious and focused, where some of the other platforms could be a little more social. So what have you seen, or what's the message there where perhaps you can say that, look, you've got to be careful of what and how you say and what you say, maybe, in some of the other platforms, or what would you say when it comes to online? Because that seems like could be one thing where is a disconnect.
Yeah. See, online is here to stay. We have learned to do a lot of business on a screen. And secondly, I always tell people, put your name into Google and see what shows up. This is what the world is seeing and forming an opinion of. If you don't like it, you can improve your personal branding.
Yeah.
For example, if you're working for a large corporation and you have a colleague sitting in another part of the world and you have to jointly work on a project and you were just marked CC on an email and they have to get out to a call with you, how do they know who you are and what you look like? The first thing they're going to do is copy paste your name into Google. And whatever shows up, they'll believe it. So, manage your online presence. Secondly, the world of social media has got very beautifully bifurcated. Sites like Instagram and Meta definitely fall into the personal domain.
Yeah.
So, your personal contacts should be on those sites. LinkedIn definitely is a professional site. Maybe Twitter one can use for knowledge, information gathering, social listening, small talk. But I expect that every professional, regardless of their generation, should definitely understand one, punch your name into Google and see what shows up. This is your personal brand. Two, please make sure that you manage your online presence. So, if you don't want people to see the photographs of you on a holiday, then just make sure that your clients and bosses are not on those sites with you, right? So, make sure that you close your accounts, you understand the privacy settings so that you are controlling what people are watching. Yes, Gen Z is very good with tech. They literally were born with an iPhone in their hand and they can very quickly navigate through many, many things. But then, if you want to build a career, before you post something, before you allow somebody entry to your friend circle, or then create circles within circles so that, you're controlling what people are watching. So I always tell people that would you want your client or your super boss to see this photograph or this post? If not, then I have a suggestion. Please manage the circle. Secondly, when it comes to LinkedIn, mostly it's the first site that opens about you when you punch your name into Google. Now, this is the first site that people are going to click. So, do you have a professional photograph of this? How many contacts do you have? What are the posts that you're sharing? People are going to be absorbing all that. So, understand your personal brand, synchronize your online and your offline presence. And please control what people are watching so that you are in the driver's seat of what is what people around you are using to form an opinion of you.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think what good advice. I mean, uh, we can very easily discount, how much damage maybe one of our personal, on a platform where we're sharing all our personal stories can quickly, form an opinion about us in the professional space, right? Now, what do you recommend here, Sheetal? Do you recommend that they then should talk to, I don't know. I mean, they themselves are tech savvy, but perhaps this is a blind spot, is what I would
Yeah.
gather sometimes, right? Should they talk to a mentor? Should they talk to someone else? How do we help them? Or, I mean, obviously, you've indicated the benefits of doing that. Or, what would be the best way? So, in other words, if some young person is coming into the system, we've recruited them, we've taken them on board, they're good, but maybe not aware of some of these things, and we can.
See, I would say a multi-pronged approach. First of all, please read the social media policy of your company. Every corporation has a social media policy. And very categorically, some of them say that religion and politics is not something that they want you discussing on social media, right? So if your client interfacing, or if you have clients which are global, so just understand, first of all, you don't want to be caught on the wrong foot. Secondly, my personal opinion is that create opaque walls between your personal life and professional. Yes, you want to have fun on a weekend or holiday. You have a right to lead your life the way you want, with whomever you want to, doing whatever you want. But the fact is that do you want your clients and your colleagues and your project leads sitting across the world seeing that? So that is a choice that you need to make. So just build awareness, and just building that awareness itself and giving it some thought. I mean, sometimes ignorance is bliss, but in this case, it's not.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I really like what you said about social media policy. We never kind of, I mean, consciously think about, what could be a formal policy which, restricts us or prohibits us. And as I think we can get into, I think all of us, why this is Gen Z, we be cautious, right? As you said rightly, sharing political views and things like that, that can create a controversy, not just for you, but for the employer, for the bosses, and maybe
Yes.
a larger force there, right? Okay, so I think that's excellent. Let's go to the I. That's very important. That's a skill which is the influencing, and obviously we've seen managers throughout their career. You could be a very experienced manager and still trying to build that skill. But obviously, since you have this nice framework, how do we help them? Talk us first about the importance of influencing, and second is that more at their stage, right? How do we build that muscle for it?
See, when it comes to leadership, the role of a leader is always to influence, motivate, and inspire. But even if you're an intern in an organization, you can start building this muscle. The ability to influence people, the ability to influence decision makers, your bosses, to get buy-in for your ideas, the ability to speak up and influence people in a business meeting, right? So I think this is a skill that can be built from the time you join a corporation. Now, why you must have it, I've explained, but how to do it and what are the skills that are needed are also important.
Yeah.
According to me, the number one skill that most people should build is effective listening. I have noticed that most people don't listen. Either they are completely zoned out when somebody is talking and they're thinking of something else, or they are thinking, we listen to answer. That means, we listen to, and we are constantly thinking, what am I going to say next? So I think building effective listening is definitely goes a long way. See, leadership styles have also changed. In the 80s, leaders were very autocratic, so they didn't need good listening skills. Slowly, we moved towards leaders who were more democratic. Today, we have leaders who are collaborative. And to be collaborative, even if you're leading a team of two people, the fact is that you need to listen. You need to listen to your client. You need to listen to your colleagues. You need to listen to your team members. So, according to me, a very important skill is listening. Secondly, of course, building focus. Social media has definitely ruined the attention spans of all generations, I would say. Why just Gen Z? And we blame them, but I would say attention span has definitely the window of opportunity has shrunk.
Yeah.
So all of us can focus much better by summarizing, by taking notes. Many times I see the meeting nobody's taking notes. Like, what do people think that they can commit so many points to memory? So take notes, take e-notes. It will help you build focus. It will also you summarize. If you display curiosity, also it helps you build focus. If you ask an interesting, intelligent question in a meeting, it definitely helps you focus. So that's important. Finally, I would say voice and calm under pressure. We live in a very turbulent time. There's a lot of pressure on everybody across, at various levels in the ladder, and to remain calm, to be, to handle your emotions well, to offer a calibrated response is important. So knowing your triggers and working with them becomes critical, regardless of how old or young you
Yeah. No, absolutely. I really like, I mean, I'm sure like, on the topic of influence, there's so much written and spoken about it and influencing their authority. But even the very simple advice of good listening, Sheetal, is so at a premium because, like you rightly said, people with more than 2-3 decades of work life still struggle with it. But I think that in itself can create, put you very differently because you're there, you're attentive, and you're doing this because you want to be there and you're present. And I think that good advice,
So I
especially.
always tell people that the word silent and the word listen have almost the same words, right? So unless you are silent, you can't listen. So yeah, it's important.
Brilliant. Yeah. So that's the we talk about the BOI, or let's talk about the S and the E, right? So it's the S. Let's talk about that's the staging, right?
Yeah.
And talk us through. Okay, are we referring more here now? Our ability to communicate more physically? Is it also verbally? Is it writing skills? What do we mean by staging?
It's a lot to do with how you communicate in front of an audience, regardless of the tool of communication. So let's start with the first one, which is speaking in front of an audience, or what we call as public speaking, right? Now, this skill, according to me, as I said earlier, has not changed in the last 10,000 years. Battles were won not on the size of the army, but how effective were the leaders in communicating the objective and motivating the soldiers, right? So this skill has not changed. Now, the fact remains that how you communicate in front of an audience is a very critical skill. Secondly, how you communicate on a video screen, because now people are only seeing 20-30% of your body. And the sense of touch and our energy field has also gone away. So you have to be much more energetic and enthusiastic on a screen. You have to maintain much more eye contact. You have to build engagement. If you switch off the camera, people tell me, oh, I'm not camera ready. And I always tell them, there are three elements to communication: visual, verbal, and vocal. And if you have taken away the visual, there is a problem because you've taken away one third of the impact. So focus on how you are appearing. Even the voice makes a difference. If you see in the last 5 years, in 2020, 21, 22, the winning sentences of the year were, "Can you hear me?" So clearly, voice has become a very critical element in communication. So it's voice, it's video, it's even an email. Are you crisp? Are you brief? Are you answering in bullet points? Do I have to pick up the phone to ask you what email have you written? Right? Also, is it so cryptic? Like sometimes people say, please action. And what am I supposed to action? Can you please highlight to me? Or then somebody will write a 200-word mail and you're trying to read it to figure out what am I supposed to do. So I think it's important for us to understand what are the levels of escalation. Face-to-face meeting will always remain the most impactful. Next comes video chat, then comes a phone call, then comes an email, and finally there's a WhatsApp message. So understand the levels of escalation, use them smartly, communicate effectively, and build your gravitas.
Right. So here, Sheetal, one more question. In your experience from leaders that you work with, for those who seem to have gotten it, right, or are becoming a role model or a benchmark to go to, right, what have you seen? Is it more practice over time? Is it that they've gotten feedback? Is it that they've gotten good mentors? What how do we get to that stage, right? For those who it's very important, like you rightly explain what it means and the relevance, right? But if I'm a young person, I would certainly may not be aware. But how do I do it? Is it what's your sort of way to get to that stage?
In first of all, it's a skill and not a trait. A trait is something that you're born with. A skill is something that you can learn. So you can learn it. When I see leaders who have executive presence, one, yeah, sure, they may be born with certain skills where you have a tendency to take on that role. Agreed. But the fact is that they have learned on the job. They have excellent mentors. They have observed world leaders, other leaders. Their quest for knowledge and learning is phenomenal. They have display a lot of curiosity in learning new skills. They are open to feedback and changing and pivoting to a new course of action. So there is a lot of effort, and definitely practice makes perfect. So it's a combination of all these things. Anybody can develop it if they decide to. So the first step to any treatment is diagnosis. So diagnose and see, is this a skill you don't have or you have? Secondly, what are the aspects of the skill that you are naturally gifted with? Like many times people have an excellent voice. And I always tell them, I said, you're so good. Why don't you use this voice for modulation? And it's a revelation that they say, really? Now they didn't know that, right? Or sometimes people have a great presence. When they sit in a meeting, they take up a lot more space and you will not forget them. You will remember them even 3 months later. So understand your strengths and gaps and work on your gaps. We are all work in progress. And this is a skill that anybody can learn and pick up if they decide.
Yeah. So very nice. I like it. Diagnosis. I mean, we don't quite look at it that way, but simple enough just by asking, which are my areas of improvements, right? Which are the areas which I think I do well? And even just hearing that, sometimes we undermine our own sort of strengths.
Yeah, we are our worst critics. Sometimes we are our worst critics.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So let's look at the last one, the E. Okay, so talk us to us, the E's, the relevance. I will build it. Go ahead.
E is building engagement,
Yeah.
connecting with people, or what we call as networking. Now, I'm firmly convinced that visibility increases opportunity, but visibility in the right circuits, in the right circles, and in the right format, right? Now, one thing that Gen Z is definitely very gifted is that they understand how to, at some level, connect with people. And I feel that at times they are even very authentic, right? So they are happy to show their vulnerability, which is a great thing to build relationships. So I think that is an area that they're definitely gifted. Secondly, they are not scared to speak up, right? Because times change, education system has changed. Maybe the world of internet knowledge has changed. So they have heard the pros and the cons. So they have a lot more information. Information became free in their generation, right? So they have a natural, there are some talents and some skills that they have. But I think it's important to build relationships within the organization. And it's very important to build relationships outside the organization. So whether it is with your peer group, with your colleagues, with your bosses, with your clients, showcase, highlight, work together, give credit to people around you, speak up in a meeting, offer genuine feedback to people, and finally, do your homework. I know homework is a bad word. It gives goosebumps because it brings horrible memories of childhood. It was a single-handed villain that killed your child, right? But the fact is that homework is critical. In fact, I have never met a leader who has not done their homework. When they meet somebody, now you can say they have a battery of people whose job is to prepare them for that meeting. But the fact is that they still have to absorb all that information. They still have to use it, process it. So, I would just say that please do you want to create impact in a meeting? Do your Write down 4 points that you're going to raise. Maybe one or two will be taken up by somebody else, but at least you'll have 2 points to share. Do you want to create impact? Write down 2 intelligent questions. But something, this will not happen when the camera is on or the meeting is rolling in person. This will happen when you're sitting at your desk and planning for the meeting. It's like saying comedy is impromptu. There's nothing impromptu about comedy. It's a very well rehearsed act. It just looks impromptu.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think all the people who we think are somewhat naturally gifted, as you said, beneath the iceberg is comes the practice and the feedback and the practice, right? So I think but it's
I'm firmly convinced that nobody can wing it. Even
yeah.
heads of states, presidents, prime ministers. I mean, they can say, oh, I've traveled 100 countries, I've met so many heads of states. Why do I need to prepare? But they really work very hard to prepare what they're going to say, how they're going to say it. So I think it's important. If there's one takeaway, it is do your homework.
Yeah, absolutely. And and I really also like the advice of just building relationships. I mean, what a super piece of advice there, not just for the young Gen Zs, and especially it's a personal life as well, but in professional life too, both inside and outside, and that really kind of almost creates this coalition, if you will, of people see you and how you can move up and so on. And there's a lot written about that too. Now, two more questions here, Sheetal. One, of course, is you work with a lot of companies, you work with a lot of leaders. In your view, like who would you admire? Like, okay, are there a few people that you've said that, okay, here are some people that like you've seen seem to have, caring, really excellent or have very good executive presence. Anyone come to mind?
Yeah, I would say that if we look at the Indian business world, I personally think that Mr. Ratan Tata has phenomenal executive presence. He almost has an aura around him. Highly charismatic person. I would say Mr. Anand Mahindra has phenomenal executive presence. Indra Nui definitely has phenomenal executive presence. I would say Kiran Ramazumdar Shaw as executive presence. So yes, in the world of business, these men and women have displayed phenomenal presence, and each of them has their own formula. And but the fact is that they definitely have they are very very good leaders, and they are very likable. That's also very important. In the way they present themselves, their personal brand is very strong, and it stands for certain value system as well.
No, yeah, I think all those four names, I don't think a single person can disagree. Just the way in which they carry themselves, the way in which they communicate, what they embody, and so on. Now, one other question here, Shikal, which is to say that if you have someone, I mean, again, in your experience with working with leaders, if you are at a certain stage on a spectrum, let's say I want to go from 0 to 10, I mean, that's the spectrum, and I'm at a 3 or a 4, like, is there a typical, and I know I'm asking a very general question, is there a typical duration through which you've seen that, okay, leaders move up that spectrum, right? How much time? I mean, again, it's a general question, but is that something that you see requires a lot more time? And I really want like you to just say because I don't want people to say, oh, okay, this is a quick fix. I'm going to do it. I'll read a book or I think these are all good tools as well. But my sense would be it's a little more longitudinal effort, right? And so what on average, or is there something that you see that, okay, this just takes effort, or, what do you see?
See, reading a book on executive presence is going to convince you on the why. So why you need to. But the how requires implementation, it requires time, it requires patience. I would say there is no magic wand. It's not that, something will put you through something and you'll come out looking differently. But the fact is that there's definitely a before and after. I would say 6 months to a year if you focus on the skills. But having said that, lessons are taken, not given. So everybody has their own learning curve. But yes, definitely 6 months would be a good window if you decide to make a change. You can see the needle move. So that definitely, I would say, is a good time.
Okay, fantastic. Now, speaking of that, you'd mentioned earlier in the show about an instrument. So I think this is a good time for you to also talk a little bit about book and the instrument and see that how that can be used.
Yes, the book I researched for about 3 years, and I spoke to a lot of business leaders. There are a lot of comments and quotes from business leaders because they felt very passionately about the subject. So I put together the book. I was lucky, HarperCollins published it, and it has become a bestseller on Amazon. But what it really does is that it's a diagnostic tool. And I always tell people that a book can reach a lot more audience than a trainer or a workshop or a coach can reach, right? So yes, it is. It has reached a lot of people who are interested in the subject across the world, and has got good reviews. But the fact is that you can use it as a diagnostic tool to understand your own strengths and gaps. So use the book, read the chapters, look at the sub chapters, see what are the areas of improvement. It definitely will open your mind to what else can you do to build that skill. And I'm sure then once you have that, you can get on to the internet. You don't even need to invest in a trainer or a coach or a training program. Once we decide to learn something, there's so much information available for free. So they can definitely learn it. But yes, one is understanding the why, two is understanding the how, and three, of course, is practicing it and learning.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, very good. Okay, so two last questions. One, of course, is what's your sort of parting advice, if you will, on maybe one or two do's and then don'ts for the Gen Z when you think about executive presence? So just as a way to summarize, over and above everything that you shared, all very good advice. Anything else, like what should they keep in mind and what shouldn't they do?
Okay, so the do's are based on their strengths because they are so tech savvy. They should definitely connect with leaders, and they're not fearful of speaking up or speaking out. They should definitely connect with leaders at various levels in the organization and work towards building relationships with them. Your network is your net worth. So start building your relationships in your 20s, and you will get the dividends in your 40s and 50s. So that's my one advice to them. The second advice is that, you should definitely manage your physical and your online presence. Don't, because the web has an elephant step. Something is posted there. Somewhere someone could have captured it. So please become mindful of your online presence and definitely focus on your physical presence because it says, I'm serious, I mean business, I respect you, I respect your time. So appropriate dressing is important, and grooming and body language is important. To say I'm interested, I'm confident, I want to articulate a thought that will add value to what you are thinking about. So add value in conversations by showing your physical presence as interested invested. When it comes to don'ts, I would say that, in terms of uh, yes, I would say focus a little more. So don't, take careers and relationships for granted. Do definitely make investments in that because what you do, the skills and the learning that you have in your 20s is phenomenal, and it is going to definitely come in, it will definitely be very helpful. So, be the second thing I would like to tell you is that be very energetic and enthusiastic in learning new things. It's not about your designation. It's not about the money that you make in your first few years of your career. It's about who you connect with, what is the learning, and how have you added value, what have you gained, how will it help you in your future life? And something, every skill will help. So whether it is, learning finance, even if you're not a finance professional, or it is working with a team, even if you're not an HR professional, or it is organizing an event, everything will lead to learning. So connect with people, build your relationship, showcase your talents, and make the journey ahead will be very fruitful.
Fantastic. Wow. Excellent advice as a way to wrap up here. Some two really good, simple do's and also the don'ts to keep in mind. Sheetal, this is one fabulous conversation. I do want to ask our final question. Where can people find more information about you? Is there a website? Is there
Yes.
online where they can look you up? Wow, how do we find you?
Yes, thank you. I look forward to connecting. They can find me on Amazon. My full name is Sheetal Kakkar Mehra. and or they can connect with me on LinkedIn. I have a Twitter account, and definitely I have a website. So there is a social media presence. Just punch my name into Google and various options will show up. And I look forward to staying in touch. In case they have a question, I would love to answer. They can write to me on Twitter or on LinkedIn. And I'm sure we'll be in touch with some of the audience. Thank you.
Okay, lovely. Well, there you have it. We've got a really nice overview and maybe a few levels deeper understanding of what is executive presence, how do we build it, what are the different elements, how do we get to that, right? And what good advantage the Generation Z has, right, to know about this so early in their career, and how do we leverage that? And Sheetal has very kindly shared all the tips, but also ways in which you can reach out and how she can support. So I would encourage all our Gen Z viewers, listeners to tap into that, and for others as well. Sheetal, thank you very much. I do hope as we make our travels that we can actually meet up in person at some point. And looking forward to more work at some point again in the future. Thank you and take care.
Thank you and goodbye. Thank you.